Now to discuss the terrorism issues highlighted in the president's speech this week, two members of the House Intelligence Committee, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff and Republican Congressman MacThornberry. Thank you both for being here today.
You bet.
All right, Congressman Schiff, I'll start with you. There's a lot of talk of the president's narrative about winding down the war on terror, which begs the question, are our enemies doing the same?
Well, I think our enemies have changed in the sense that we have seriously degraded the core of al-Qaeda, and I think the president's speech was a recognition of that. The likelihood that al-Qaeda can launch the kind of attack we saw on 9/11 has been seriously diminished. Instead, we have now these franchises, these spin-offs, these one-offs like we saw in Boston, like the British saw with that tragic attack this week. And I think the president is saying that needs an adjustment in terms of how we use our drones and the strategic impact of those. It also means that we have to take a look at some of the broader strategic problems we face, the black eye that we have from Guantanamo. So I think the president was right to say we're at a different point than we were on 9/11. That's going to call for different tactics going forward, and I think he laid out a pretty sensible plan.
All right, and Congressman Thornberry, to the point about Guantanamo Bay, which the president brought up and your colleague as well, the president said it's become a symbol around the world that America flouts the law.
Yeah. I don't think that's true. The president has been arguing we should close it for his whole presidency, but he's never really put forth a plan on how to do that. And even in the speech last week, what he said was, if we're committed to closing it, then we can work out the details later about what happens to these guys. Another thing he said is, okay, we're going to take some of these folks from Guantanamo and send them back to Yemen. Then he says Yemen is the place where the greatest danger to our homeland emanates right now. And, by the way, they don't have a very good record at keeping people locked up. So I think there's some inconsistencies here. It is absolutely true, as Adam said, that the threat has evolved. But as you are degrading the core of al-Qaeda, that may not be the best time to let up. As a matter of fact, I think this notion that we can just say, okay, we've beaten the terrorists, we can go back to the way things were before 9/11 is a dangerous notion.
And to that point, Congressman Schiff, Senator McCain talking about this said he found parts of the speech incredible. What the president was suggesting, he said, al-Qaeda has been expanding from Mali to Yemen, a hotspot we've talked about, and everywhere in between. It's not the time to back down.
Well, the president isn't saying it's time to back down. I think that's a misstatement of what the president was talking about. But he is saying that the threat has changed. And with it, our approach to that threat also has to change. Yes, we have to be focused on al-Qaeda wherever it exists, but it is not the same core leadership. It's not the same top-down architecture that it had on 9/11. And that means that we have to shift our approach, too. And I think the president is also signaling, too, that the drone campaign and Guantanamo and some of the approaches we've used post 9/11 have also had their costs. Yes, he's acknowledged that they've had their benefits, and the president isn't curtailing the drone program. He is reining it in. But he's saying also there's a strategic impact as the drone program, as Guantanamo, as other things, not only take people off the battlefield, but also create new jihadis to go after us that use that as a rallying cry. So I think he's recalibrating the approach in places like Mali. He wants to use more of the indigenous forces, turn it over to more of our training role rather than more American boots on the ground there and all over the world. I think he's signaling that the large American occupation of places like Afghanistan and Iraq has to be a thing of the past.
I want to make sure that we have you both weigh in on this issue of Benghazi as well. We continue to learn new information. The House, of course, has played a major role, several hearings there, in trying to get to the bottom of what we know, a timeline for what happened and who knew what when. Congressman Thornberry, are you satisfied with the answers you've received so far? What pieces of information, if any, are still lacking for you?
Well, I think there continues to be questions about what happened before, what happened during, and what happened after the attack in Benghazi. As a matter of fact, we were both in a hearing this week where I learned new things about what went on that day. And so whether it's exactly who denied the repeated requests for increased security before the attack and why they denied them, to questions about the military chain of command, why things did or did not happen during the event, and the political spin afterwards. I think there's more to come. And it's not just about, the temptation will be, we've got the IRS scandal, the AP scandal, is to turn our attention away from Benghazi. But for the families of those who lost their lives, but also those people who are serving our country all around the world in embassies potentially exposed like this, I think we have an obligation to get to the bottom of the matter and learn why it happened so it doesn't happen again.
Do you think there's still questions to be answered?
There are, but they're not the questions that we've been asking, unfortunately. The most important things on Benghazi, in my view, are where are we in the hunt for those responsible? And what are we doing to implement the recommendations of the Accountability Review Board to improve our security around the world? Those are important questions, but unfortunately those aren't the ones we're paying attention to. Instead, we're having endless hearings about talking points. And the remarkable thing to me about the most recent hearing we had in the Intelligence Committee this week with Mr. Morrell on the talking points is that what he said was basically what we heard from the intelligence agencies from the beginning, which is they created the talking points. Yes, they made changes to them. They weren't driven by the White House. They weren't driven by political spin. And the most significant flaw in the talking points, the idea that they began as a protest, was something that the intelligence community got wrong. So I don't know how many times we want to ask the same question about the talking points and get the same answer, but I think we've pretty well exhausted that part of the issue.
It's clear, though, from a number of sources, there was input from the administration with regard to why do we want to give members of Congress ammunition against us, those kinds of things. Congressman Thornberry, quick final word to you.
Yeah, I think there's more to learn here, and the political spin afterwards is just one of the issues that we need to pursue. But there were decisions before, during, and after that are important that we get the answers to.
Gentlemen, we thank you both.